final hearing before conference, and not to extend the debate, but just for just a little sense of balance. First, I just want to reiterate what I had mentioned in my opening comments. Because we are taking, and I don't believe it's betting the farm in any way, LAO has a track record now in recent years of coming much closer to the mark than finance. And we recognize, and I say it with full respect, Governor Brown has set out a very conservative path, and he will, by nature, underestimate revenues, so there's less to spend, and potentially even overestimate caseloads. So again, less to spend. Not a criticism, just a fact. Because we are going what we think historically is the more accurate revenue number, it allows us to also have more debt repayment and more in reserves than in the governor's plan. So getting back to Senator Morlock's rightful concern, if the LAO misses the mark by a little bit, before we have to cut into any programs, before we have to go into our reserves, our rainy day fund, we can slow the additional repayment of debt, and we can slow the addition to our reserves. So we have options here long before we are cutting programs or cutting or dipping into our rainy day fund. Now, if far beyond anyone's projection, we were to repeat, I hate to even say it out loud, a tragedy like 2008, well, then we're in a very different situation. Clearly, we will revisit our spending. That may take statutory action, and that is why we have now built up upwards of $6 billion in reserves. So I still think this is very thoughtful. And then just before we go on to Senator Hancock and Senator Nielsen, with regard to whether we have a revenue problem or a spending problem, in 2008, when we surpassed $100 billion of general fund budgeting for the first time, the LAO, in its out-year projection, said that by 2012, we would just on the natural, due to inflation and population growth, get to $125 billion general fund budget in 2012. Well, then, of course, 2008 hit. We weren't at 125 by 2012. We were closer to 90. So we had lost a full third of our revenue.
You just made my point, Senator. The LAO isn't always on target.
Senator Stone, tragedies happen that we don't project. When they happen, if they happen, as a result, we lost a third of our revenue. We were down to 90 billion. We had a revenue problem. Now we're talking about the 15-16 budget at 115 billion, still far below where the LAO suggested we would be on the natural 4 years ago. So I think there's still a strong argument. We've got a revenue problem. We're dealing with trying to, and this is a delicate balance, and I think this is where we agree. How do we continue to responsibly pay down debt? How do we responsibly continue to grow a reserve and rainy day fund? And we all collectively, I think unanimously, put Prop 2 on the ballot. And at the same time, begin, not in 1, 2, or 5 years, to reinvest where we had to make such drastic cuts in the past 5, 6 years. So that is where we're trying to go. I know we're trying to reach the same end, but I don't think there's anything irresponsible about what we're proposing here today. That's just my opinion in response to yours. Senator Hancock, then Senator Nielsen, and then I hope we can get to our vote.
Thank you very much, Senator Leno. Just an observation on the previous topic, very general. You know, we are the richest state and the richest country in the world, and austerity is a choice, not a necessity, in my view. And we make choices based on how we see the greatest good for the people of California. And I'm always in awe of the balancing act that this budget is, as we try to make the choices that we have to make. Having said that, I have another issue that I would just like to put on the table at this time relating to the Prop 98 budget. And it's about a program called the After School Education and Safety Program. It is a program that takes care of young people in our neediest schools, about 400,000 of them, between the hours of 3 and 6, when their parents are at work. And if there's nobody home and nothing to do, and they're out on the street, research has shown us those are the hours, not the midnight basketball hours or anything else, but those afternoon hours are the hours where their greatest likelihood of coming into the criminal justice system, either as victims or perpetrators, and also the greatest likelihood for self-reported sexual activity leading to teen pregnancy are likely to occur. Many of the schools served by this program have over 80% free and reduced lunch. One of the things the program also does is it gives them a snack and a little food before they leave in the evening. Principals tell us that for many of these kids, that's what they're going to eat until they come to school and hope to get a school breakfast the next day. The program has not had an increase in its daily rate for 14 years. Many of the programs are closing, which is why the Assembly, in its version of the budget, has put money for increasing the amount of reimbursement per student from $7.50 a day to $8.50 a day. The national standard for these programs is $21 per student per day. The $7.50 isn't per hour, it's per day, per student. And in the interest of really looking at the whole child, of taking care of our kids so that they succeed in school, so we stop the school, so we can put a stop to any cycling of young people through our criminal justice system. I was actually told by a young man recently released from prison, who I asked, what would have changed things for you? And I totally uncoached, he looked at me and said, something to do after school and maybe a man to take an interest in me. So having these programs, keeping them from collapsing with a small amount of money, I believe is very important. I'm going to vote for the Senate package today. I hope as the discussions move forward, both with the administration and with the Assembly, we'll find a way to include that augmentation.
Thank you, Senator Hancock, in particular for your commitment to that identifiable hole in our day's continuum of attention to our children to make sure they succeed, and to reiterate, this will be going to conference committee, so the conversation does continue. We have Senator Nielsen and then Senator Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and these are laborious and trying times. In 2008, we were looking at $45 billion in the red, and that's the largest mountain I've had to be a part of climbing since I first began to serve in this honorable body. As we proceed, and we will come to some kind of budget agreements here that will gain sufficient votes, but we must not repeat the errors of the past, where we feasted heavily and disregarded the eventuality of the famine. Fortunately, there was a resolve last year to see that the need for Proposition 2, which is kind of a governor on our budget spending. It is a reserve. And when it was first talked about in the 80s and a reserve was set aside, it was for emergency situations. And those were more viewed to be natural disasters, force majeures. Now then it became called economic uncertainties. But what a reserve ought not ever be is looked at as a piggy bank, a pot of money to covet and spend. As have been over the years, as we've struggled to balance the budget, the various and vast numbers of accruing funds, which are taxes upon individual citizens in some kinds of ways, like off-road vehicle, and those monies have been coveted and swept. We ought not be doing that. And as more funds are available to build some programs back, maybe in some cases to come up with some new ideas that work better than the old ideas. And I submit we particularly need to do that in criminal justice. A lot of the rehabilitation cannot demonstrate, it clearly has not, that it was working. And I'm not willing to keep pouring money into it. Nor could we continue to pour money into the Delta the way we did with CalFed and not fix the Delta. So it's incumbent on the policymakers to be very thorough in their examinations and to make sure there is accountability for the funds that are spent. So we can learn by the mistakes of the past and learn by the successes of the past. The governor has, to his credit, focused on debt. And we've not talked quite enough here today about debt, and I intend to bring debt retirement up a lot more. Just because we have more money doesn't mean that we should spend and forget the debt retirement. I'd like to quit reading the stories about this tremendous pension debt that we have accrued. And lastly, and this is one of my disappointments, I saw in 08 a true opportunity. An opportunity to get some control over the agencies of government that have so exponentially grown and have even grown during the course of this very tough time. With the Department of Corrections, for example, there has been no bonus. Remember the base closure and the dividend that was to accrue to go to social programs because we didn't spend all that money on the military? Well, now we had vast numbers of fewer inmates and parolees to deal with. They've been dumped on local government. Now you would think, and it should have, the Department of Corrections budget would have gone down. It has not. It's gone up. And one high official, who I lost a lot of respect for, told me it was because the court. Folks, the court has cost us some money indeed. But don't go blaming the problems of CDCR on the court. The court intervened because over decades, the legislature and governors, plural, did not deal with the situation. And they did not create the fact that CDCR is paying more now with much fewer populations to serve. My point in closing is, yes, we need to do some things, and there's going to be some restorations and some new obligations made. But we dare not emulate the follies of the past and go on a big spending spree or dip into that reserve that we have now just created for the very reason that we could be a more responsible state, look better in the markets, and have a sustaining growth and future and balanced budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Of course, thank you, Senator Nielsen. Senator Wolk, and then it looks like we'll take our vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be brief. I want to return to the issue that Senator Hancock mentioned, and very briefly. There are two very important reasons that we should consider it, and I appreciate the fact that you said it will be going to conference. The first is that it's already in Prop 98 and has been there. And the second reason, and probably the most important reason, actually, is because we should keep our word. This was something that, this program was approved by the voters of the state of California. It was proposed by the previous governor, put on the ballot, and supported. And we really do need to keep our word and make sure that it doesn't shut down. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wolk. So there is a motion before us to adopt the Senate Prop 98 package. Call the roll, please.
Leno?
Aye.
Leno, aye. Nielsen?
No?
Nielsen, no. Ellen? Ellen, aye. Anderson? Anderson, no. Bell? Block? Block, aye. Hancock? Hancock, aye. Mitchell? Mitchell, aye. Monning? Monine, aye. Morlock? Morlock, no. Wynn? Wynn, no. Pan? Pan, aye. Pavley? Pavley, aye. Roth? Roth, aye. Stone? Stone, no. Woke? Woke, aye. Bell, aye. That's 11-5.
The measure passes 11-5.
Chairman Leno, before we move on.
Yes.
I just want to say a few things about our revenue estimate.
Of
Since there
course.
was a lot said about our revenue estimate. We do work very closely with the Legislative Analyst's Office, and our revenue estimates are quite similar, actually nearly identical in the current year. The difference is really a matter of $3 billion in the budget year, and our concern continues to be that these are related to capital gains and other highly volatile revenues. And while their estimates may be correct, ours may be correct, we may be higher, we may end up being lower. We do not want to base our budget on these revenues that are speculative in our view. And so that's really kind of the basis of the difference. It's really quite small, but it is significant in our eyes because we really do not want to, if you look back over the past decade, running up to 2000 and the dot-com bust, and then 2008 and the Great Recession that we had here in California, in all of those scenarios, there was, steady as you go projected in terms of the economy, in terms of the revenues for the state, and great large corrections were made in both of those cases. And there was a lot of uncertainty that was caused by committing ongoing revenues that we just simply didn't have in the next ensuing years. So our commitment is to really try and keep the state on steady footing over the forecast period. And as I said earlier, we already are projecting an operating deficit with just what is committed to in the May revision by 2018-19. It's partly to do with the triggering off of Proposition 30 revenues, which are temporary and will expire starting in 2016, at the end of 2016, but also due to other expenditure commitments that the state has taken on, including taking on a share of costs related to the optional expansion under the Affordable Care Act, among other growing commitments that the state has made. So that's just a few comments on that.
Thank you, Ms. Bosler, and I appreciate that you would reiterate that you do work closely with the Legislative Analyst's Office on these revenue projections, and I wouldn't argue with anything that you've just said, with one exception. Numbers I have show that the Budget Act of the current year was $102.9 billion, which of course was the governor's May revision last year at this time. But the LAO's May revision was $3 million higher, and the actual, of course, was even $3 million above the LAO. So for the past couple of years, there has been a slight, in the neighborhood of $2-3 billion difference in the two. So we're going to move on to Hastings College of Law. That would be on pages 9 and 10. The first is issue 6 on page 9.
Ask for the alums to raise their hand. Sorry. Ask for the alums of Hastings College of Law to raise their hand.
Ms. Bosler.
Yeah, this item just reflects our January budget proposal that did provide an augmentation of $1 million to the Hastings College of Law to reflect a multi-year funding commitment that we made to the college.
Thank you. Very good. LAO?
Paul Golozewski with the LAO. We had expressed a concern with this proposal that the funding is provided on a lump sum basis. It's not designated for specific purposes. And in particular, in Hastings' budget, there's no connection between funding and enrollment. And we had recommended requiring Hastings to develop an enrollment funding formula that you could use for your budget decisions moving forward.
And with regard to this being a fulfillment of a multi-year funding plan, you don't disagree with that?
It's part of the governor's multi-year funding plan. The legislature has never committed to this ongoing funding plan, so you certainly have discretion if you want to provide a different amount of funding.
Very good. We have questions, comments from the committee, otherwise public comment? Not on this issue. Senator Block?
Yeah, I'm prepared to make a motion on this, but first, I just want to state a position that I've stated in subcommittee. I have concerns about the state investing more money in more lawyers. As an attorney, I know there are at least a couple more attorneys on this panel. I very much value the importance of the legal profession to California. It's just at this point we have more lawyers than we have jobs for lawyers. Or teachers. And we have a real shortage of people in the medical professions, a real shortage of doctors, a real shortage of auxiliary medical professionals. And with the ACA, it's just going to get worse. It seems to me, just as basic philosophy, putting more money into law schools, public money, private money, people do what they want, putting more public money into law schools rather than using that same money to create more family practice, more primary care physicians, is just the wrong policy to pursue. Having said that, I do value Hastings Law School, and I do understand the need for the support that they've requested, and I will move that we approve this request.
Thank you, Senator Block. Your comment is always welcome. And I'm not, as a we will have a response from the legal side in just a moment. As a non-lawyer, I just want to point out, and yes, I recognize that Hastings College of Law is in my district, but as our analysis points out, that the number of students at Hastings over the past 5 years has dropped by nearly a third. So they recognize that the legal world has changed since 2008. I've had conversations with them. They know that they need to really scale down their program. And amazingly, though it is a part of the University of California system, it of course predates the UC system. It was a gift of the Hastings family back close to 140 years ago, that they continue to reduce the size and scale of it. And though it is a part of our public education system, it is 90% privately funded. It just has a 10% public support, and we still call it a public institution. Senator Monning.
Just very briefly, thank you, Mr. Chair. All due respect to my esteemed colleague and lawyer, Senator Block, while there may be an abundance of law grads in the current economy, there, in my experience, is not an abundance of lawyers working in certain communities in California. And I would, while we don't condition this budget item to what types of lawyers are educated and graduated, I do think things we can do to expand access to legal representation, just as we work to expand access to medical care, should be a continued objective of this legislature. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Monning. And Senator Allen.
Yeah, I was about to say just what Senator Monning was about to say, and that's that there is such a dearth of representation in a lot of our communities, even if we may be over-lawyered in other areas of industry. And so I guess I'd like us to continue thinking about this. This is a discussion we had in the subcommittee. You know, there are so many people out there who really do need representation in the social justice arena, and I want us to keep thinking about that.
Thank you, Senator Allen. Senator Block, and then we'll take our vote.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with my colleagues in the bar that there is a dearth of lawyers practicing in areas that need them. But we have found out, experience teaches, that producing more lawyers doesn't fill that need, because lawyers don't go where they're needed, they go where there's money. If in fact this were conditioned upon funding lawyers that practice in areas of need, I would support this bill in a heartbeat.
Let's call for the question, Mr. Chair. I don't think we need to defend lawyers. We got.
Okay.
One moment. I know that was said with good humor. We're going to let Senator Block finish, and then is there anyone else who wants to speak before we take our roll call? Senator Allen and Senator Papley. Okay, yeah. Senator Block.
Anyway, agreeing with Senator Allen and Senator Monning, If there were some requirement that lawyers practice in areas where there's a shortage, I'd support that in a minute. Right now, I think that we could clearly see more of a need for doctors than lawyers. It's not to say we don't need lawyers in some areas, but we have a limited number of dollars to spend. Let's spend them on more primary care physicians. That's all I'd say.
Thank you, Senator Block. Senator Allen, then Senator Pavlik.
I guess I would just say this is a modest request. What we did here in subcommittee was that Hastings does actually have a much higher percentage of their young lawyers going off into social justice causes and public service causes, et cetera. I very much agree with Senator from San Diego's comments, and I would love to work with him on this. I think it's a statewide problem that we need to get our heads around. But that's why I agree with his motion to support this important item.
Thank you, Senator Allen. Senator Pavlik.
Well, I just can't resist getting into this fray of using general fund support to attract or allow more lawyers into the marketplace where they're deciding, we're not saying where the needs should be filled, but I know of an excellent program to have loan forgiveness programs to attract people to go into teaching. And in exchange, they are teaching in low-performing schools for 5 years. So we are directing them with a possible infusion of general fund to fill what is a growing need. And for the 10th year in a row, we have, again, a reduced number of people going into teaching credentialing. So maybe looking at hard-to-fill professions and how we expend our general fund would be a good idea.
Thank you, Senator Pavlik. So just to put a period on it, again, Hastings, recognizing the change in the workforce, has dropped its enrollment by 30% in recent years. The million that is before us will be used, according to Hastings, to cover increased retirement costs and lower its student-to-faculty ratio from 20 to 1 down to 14 to 1, which is much more comparable to other law schools. So that's what's before us. We'll call the roll, please.
Leno?
Aye.
Leno, I. Nielsen?
Aye.
Nielsen, I. Allen? Allen, I. Anderson? No. Anderson, no. Bell?
Aye.
Bell, I. Block? Aye. Block, I. Hancock? Aye. Hancock, I. Mitchell? Aye. I. Monning?
Aye.
Monning, I. Morlock? Morlock, I. Wynn? Aye. Wynn, I. Pan?
Aye.
Pan, I. Pavley? Aye. Roth?
Aye.
Roth, I. Stone? Stone, no. Wolk?
Aye.
Wolk, aye. 14-2.
The vote on that is 14-2. The motion passes. And then we will have one other Hastings College issue before us. That's number 7 on page 10, capital outlay. Ms. Bosler.
Yes, this is a proposal that was made in our January budget that was modified in a May letter. It's a proposal for $36.8 million in lease revenue bonds that will be utilized to replace Hastings' primary academic building that was built around 1953 and is just outgrown its useful life. There's also some additional provisional language that we've proposed to give Hastings more flexibility to accept private donations to help to finance this new building, and that's really all of it. So,
Thank you, Ms. Bosler and Leo.
We didn't have any concerns with this proposal.
All right, thank you, Senator Block. We do have a motion to approve the May letter, which provides for the $36.8 million in lease revenue bonds. Senator Morlock.
And Mr. Chair, just one comment. When we reviewed this in subcommittee, it appears that Hastings College has 2 city blocks in downtown San Francisco. So you might be real familiar with the site, but it seems to me that instead of borrowing that, you sell one block and then build out the other would be a little more attractive, and you'd come out without having a debt, and you'd be fully funded on the rebuild. So I brought it up. I don't recall getting any kind of follow-up on this.
So either LAO or Ms. Bosler might be able to go deeper into detail than I, but my memory tells me, Senator, that number one, as was noted, the current building is literally falling down, so they have to replace it. And the other property that they have they're going to be repurposing for student housing because, of course, the cost of housing in San Francisco is astronomical. And this will allow them to be able to subsidize the housing for their own students. But if you have any more information, feel free.
Sally Lucanville, Department of Finance. That is correct. And it's important to keep in mind, too, that the property where the new facility will be sited is owned by Hastings, so there would be no acquisition costs. And as you mentioned, they do plan to repurpose the existing building for additional student housing, which is in great need for the San Francisco area that it's in.
Very good. Senator Stone.
Thank you. Could you please just explain to me the debt service on the bonds, where that revenue is going to come from? Is it going to come from the lease we're charging the university, or where's it coming from?
Yes. We would issue lease revenue bonds for this project, and the way lease revenue bonds worked is the State Public Works Board owns the facility, and the facility must be fully constructed and occupied, and the client agency leases that facility back from the state. The rent payments that are made by the agency are then used to pay the debt service.
So is the revenue then the tuition proceeds that are paid, and the school is paying the state the offset for the debt service?
Well, the debt service, or the lease payments are built into the budget, would be built into Hastings' budget, and then those payments would be used to offset the debt service.
And again, as I said earlier, 90% of their budget is all privately raised and funded. So we have a motion. Call the roll, please.
Leno?
Aye.
Leno, aye. Nielsen?
Aye.
Nielsen, aye. Allen? Allen, aye. Anderson? Anderson, aye. Bell? Bell, aye. Block? Block, aye. Hancock? Hancock, aye. Mitchell? Mitchell, aye. Mawning? Mawning, aye. Morlock? Wynn? Wynn, aye. Pan? Pan, aye. Pavley? Pavley, aye. Roth? Roth, aye. Stone?
No.
Stone, no. Woke? Woke, aye. It's 14 aye, 1 no.
14-1. The motion passes.